rather than seeing elements as opportunities or facilities for enjoyment, as teachers that can teach us things. That's the Avadhuta Brahman's position. So now we're going to begin chapter 8, and I'm going to read the chapter summary. Lord Krishna told Uddhava how the Avadhuta Brahman explained to Maharaj Yadu the instructions he had received from 9 of his gurus, beginning with the Python. That's this chapter, so it starts with number 9. There were 8 in the previous chapter. The instruction the Avadhuta Brahmana received from the Python is that an intelligent person should cultivate a mentality of detachment and should maintain his body by accepting whatever comes of its own accord or is easily obtained. In this way, he should remain always engaged in the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even if no food is available, the person who wants to engage fully in the Lord's worship should not beg. Rather, he should understand this to be the arrangement of providence, thinking, whatever enjoyment is destined for me will automatically come, and thus I should not uselessly waste the remaining duration of my life in worrying about such things. If he does not get any food, he should simply remain lying, like the Python, and patiently fix his mind in meditation upon the Supreme Lord. Good luck, right? That's the Paramahansa stage. That's what Madhavendra Puri did, or that's what Rishabdev did at the end of his life. And so it's an instruction to not don't over endeavor, and be willing, be happy, contented to accept whatever comes of its own accord. You do, but you don't excessively do. You accept what comes of its own accord. The instruction of the Avadhuta Brahmana received from the ocean is that the mind of the sage who is devoted to the personality of Godhead appears very clear and grave, just like the still ocean waters. The ocean does not overflow during the rainy season, when all the flooded rivers discharge their waters into it, nor does it dry up during the hot season, when the rivers fail to supply it. Similarly, the sage does not become elated when he achieves desirable things, nor does he become distressed in their absence. That's the ocean and Python. Now comes the moth. Instruction of the moth is that just as he becomes enticed by the fire and gives up his life, the fool who cannot control his senses becomes enchanted by the forms of women decorated with gold ornaments and fine clothing. That's one of the things that's spoken about with Putana. She was really decked out. So everyone was, maybe she's the goddess of fortune, maybe she's the wife of one of the demigods, maybe. And so because of the external, they were respectful and a little awestruck. Chasing after those embodiments of the divine, illusory energy of the Lord, he, the moth, loses his life untimely and falls down in the most horrible hell, or one too much attached to material opulence. there are two kinds of bees, the bumblebee and the honeybee. No, I didn't know that there was two kinds of bees. The instruction learned from the bumblebee is that a sage should collect only small amounts of food from many different households and thus day after day practice the occupation of madhukari for maintaining his existence. So the bumblebee goes madhukari and the python doesn't even do that. So there's stages of detachment. A sage should also collect the essential truths from all scriptures, be they great or insignificant. The instruction received from the second insect, the honeybee, is that a mendicant sannyasi should not save the food he begs for the sake of having it later that night or the next day, because if he does so, that then, just like the greedy honeybee, he'll be destroyed along with his hoard. That would be interesting to hear. From the elephant, the Avadhuta Brahmana received the following instruction. Male elephants are tricked by hunters in moving toward captive female elephants, whereupon they fall into the hunter's ditch and are captured. Similarly, the man who becomes attached to the form of a woman falls down into the deep well of material life and is destroyed. Very good. So we got a few more. Honey thief. The instruction received from the honey thief is that just as he steals the honey collected with great effort by the honeybee, a person in the renounced order of life has the privilege of enjoying before anyone else the food and other valuable things purchased by the hard-earned money of the householders. Interesting, huh? The instruction from the deer is that just as he became confused upon hearing the song of the hunter's flute and loses his life, so also does any person who becomes attracted to mundane music and song, uselessly wasting his life. The instruction learned from the fish is that because he comes under the sway of attachment to the sense of taste, he is caught on the baited hook and must die. Similarly, an unintelligent person who is victimized by his insatiable tongue will also end up losing his life. And then the final is what the chapter is entitled. It's a prostitute who is named Pingala. There was once a prostitute named Pingala in the city of Videha, and from her the Avadhuta learned another lesson. There's a lot of verses on the prostitute. One day she dressed herself in very attractive clothing and ornaments and was waiting from sunset until midnight for a customer. She waited in great anticipation, but as the time passed, her mind became very uneasy. No man came to see her, and in disgust she finally became renounced, giving up her hankering for the arrival of a suitor. Thereafter, she engaged herself in thinking only of the Supreme Lord Hari, and her mind achieved the supreme platform of peace. The instruction received from her is that hopes for sense gratification are the root cause of all suffering. Therefore, only one who has given up such hankering can fix himself in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead and achieve transcendental peace, even if it's born of frustration. We hear in Canto 1, Chapter 13, about the different kinds of renunciation. And this is definitely not the topmost kind of renunciation. What Dhritarashtra did was leaving behind the same kind. Well, rather long, but I'll read it. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was on the topmost platform of devotional service. And to help people come to that topmost platform of devotional service, he understood the importance of knowledge and detachment. It's very detached and very knowledgeable. And so he made a very extensive verse-by-verse commentary on the whole of Uddhava Gita, out of compassion for people that they would not have to be illusioned and could be detached from illusory enjoyments. And this section is very important, just like Bhagavad Gita is very important. We often say Bhagavad Gita is spoken by Krishna, the Bhagavatam is spoken about Krishna. But there's a large section that's spoken by Krishna. Very significant. There can be no better authority than Krishna speaking about anything. But the conclusion is speaking about himself, or the path to reach himself. So knowledge and detachment is very important. So we're going to hear Bhaktisiddhanta's rendering of chapter summary. And he lists them literally 1 through 9. So 8 plus 9, how many is that? 8 plus 9?
17.
8 plus 9?
17.
17. And there's 24, so there's more in the next chapter. And then a summary of the whole thing. So this is a summary of what's going to be in the 9 in this chapter. Bhaktisiddhanta writes, in this chapter, the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna describes to Uddhava what the Avadhuta Brahmana had learned from the 9 spiritual masters, beginning with the Python. 1. The lesson to be learned from the Python, : it is the duty of intelligent persons to remain engaged in the worship of the Supreme Lord, while maintaining livelihood with whatever is easily available by the arrangement of providence. Even if no food is available, one who desires to worship the Supreme Lord should think that whatever is destined to him will certainly come, and that he should not waste his precious time uselessly endeavoring for the bodily necessities. In this way, he should maintain himself like a python. Again, it's a little different than the bumblebee. Who does not endeavor for food. This practice will enable him to meditate on the Supreme Lord with undivided attention. Of course, if you're not qualified, you won't meditate on the Lord. You'll meditate on how hungry you are. The satisfaction of the senses, arrangements for the necessities of life, is how to do that in a way that's going to lead to God consciousness. Let's say it negatively. Without God consciousness, the materialist animal, bird, insect, fish, and human is simply engaged in taking care of, arranging for necessities of the body, and trying to do in a way that's like fancy or something, a new way of doing the same thing, when there's absence of God consciousness. When there's a path going towards God consciousness, it's very important to consider necessities, and where's the line of necessities, and beyond that line of necessities, what's that? And that's not, if it's not necessary, then it's going to be covering consciousness. So it's really important for each one of us to understand the principle, controlling the senses by regulating the senses, and not hankering for more, because the nature of passion is more is never enough. More leads to more. Right? It burns like fire. Dushparena analena cha. More. And you get more. Then you need more. It's fuel on the fire. It produces a bigger fire. Anala. Fire. So there's options of going in a different direction. And one is, minimally, is just regulate the senses. But then regulation could become complacency. And one is, minimally, is just regulate the senses. But then regulation could become fixed. Okay. So there's degrees. The principle of karma yoga, or sacrifice, is offered to Krishna, so that there's not bondage by trying to be the enjoyer. There's increase of do it for Krishna, bhakti, not just detachment from the results, but increase of bhakti, and it diminishes the sense of necessity. It's just natural. When the light goes on, darkness is dispelled. When bhakti increases, the sense of necessity diminishes. There's still necessity, but even within that bandwidth of necessity, it's for Krishna. So whatever it may be, just take the eating. It's what's needed to keep body and soul together, and not indulging the sense otherwise. And so it's the bhakti principle carries one to a place where whatever the engagement is for Krishna, and it spiritualizes one's existence. Going back, it's a nice idea. Going back, supposing bhakti is weak. I know some people where bhakti is not strong yet. So then there's this unsteadiness and frustration and feeling bad about oneself, and it's not progressive. It's another mode of nature, but it's not elevating mode of nature. So there's instructions in ways of diminishing the indulgence of the senses. Madhukari, the bumblebee, is one. And here it's just completely, unless something comes of its own accord, eating or other things, the necessities. You just don't make a big deal about it. In this lecture that I heard Prabhupada speaking from Hyderabad, specific to this point, he was saying, he was giving the example of the Juhu temple. And there was a big issue over the control of the land. The Prabhupada very wisely and devotedly placed Radharas Vihari in a tin shed as a temple. So religious people wouldn't uproot Radharasa Vihari. It's Radharasa Vihari's temple. It's Radharasa Vihari's land. But so anyway, he went saying, when there was some issue, well, what about the people that were living in those apartments in the back? He said, they can live with us. They don't have to be engaged in fruitive work to get necessities. You just stay with us, chant Hare Krishna, take a little prasad, but they'll say no. Because the impetus is fruitive work to get sense gratification, to get objects, to enjoy the senses. The bhakti option, if offered, people will say no because they're on a different channel. You can't say yes to the Bhakti channel. But the Bhakti channel doesn't mean don't work. It means you see to necessities in practical ways. But even in that, like the bumblebee, it's not more than what's necessary. And the bumblebee leaves behind a honeycomb for people besides himself. So you're distributing whatever may come. That's our life of devotion. So there's different ashrams for that purpose, but the principle, that's our principle. So here we go. Yeah. The lesson to be learned from the ocean, number 2 out of 9. Self-realized souls who are inclined towards the Supreme Lord appear very pure and gray, just like the water of a calm ocean. As the ocean does not increase during the rainy season, even as many rivers flow into it, nor does it dry up in summer when no water from rivers enters it. A self-realized soul is neither elated when he receives objects of enjoyment nor distressed when such objects are lacking. Okay, Python, ocean, then comes moth. Just as a moth is enticed by fire, flies into the fire and dies, foolish people whose senses are not controlled and are attached to the form of a woman, her golden ornaments and her dress, and thus fall down to the darkest regions of hell. Chasing after these embodiments of divine illusory energy of the Lord, one ultimately loses his life and falls down into the most horrible hell. Plus 3. The moth and the python. A renounced person should not accumulate food, thinking he will eat it later, in the evening or the next day. If he does so, he will be destroyed along with his accumulated food, just as a greedy honeybee is destroyed along with its honey. Doesn't say how that's done. There's a pastime in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela where he was traveling with one person, and the one person on Lord Chaitanya's behalf was doing Madhukari. This wasn't Jagatananda Pandit. When they were traveling, heading from Shantipur, from just after Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, they went to Shantipur for some days, and then from Shantipur to Puri. So Jagatananda Pandit, young Jagatananda Pandit, was given the service of Madhukari for the group of 6 as they were traveling to Puri. So there was another occasion where Lord Chaitanya was traveling with a mendicant devotee. I don't recall his name. And he did Madhukari. They accepted the remnants after offering to Krishna. And then the next day, there was some discussion about should it time to perform Madhukari. And the mendicant said, I have something left from yesterday. Lord Chaitanya said, oh, I can understand you're a householder. You should get married. No. I was just doing this for you. He said, a mendicant doesn't do this. So That's strict. The application of the principle, it may be a little different in our lives, but we should understand a renunciate is not one who accumulates. We heard this many times. Bhaktisiddhanta, when any one of his Gaudiya monks received money, he would insist that they distribute it, use it in Krishna's service, because you accumulate money, you become lazy and attached. So that was a principle in Gaudiya monk. No savings. In practical terms, in modern times, that's a little difficult, but it's depending upon Krishna. The householders are required to have something, and mendicants are not required to have something. They're required to have dependence on Krishna. That's the principle of a renounced person's life. They're just dependent upon Krishna. So different for different ashrams. Elephant. The male elephant follows the female elephant with the desire to enjoy her, and thus falls into a ditch made by a hunter and is trapped. In the same way, one who is attached to the form of a woman is destroyed by falling deep into the well of material existence. So that was 5, going backwards. The elephant, the 2 types of bees, the moth, the ocean, the python. Now we're going to number 6. Honey thief. Just as a man takes all the honey that was collected with hard labor by the honeybees, one in the renounced order of life has the privilege of enjoying before anyone else the food and other valuable things purchased by the hard-earned money of the householders. Okay, that's 6. 3 more. The deer loses his life after being attracted by the music of a hunter. Similarly, the life of a person who is attached to worldly songs is wasted. And there's a lot of that. A lot of that. A fish. Just as a fish meets with death when it tries to enjoy the baited fish hook, unintelligent people spoil their valuable human life by being slaves to the demands of the insatiable tongue. We've heard this. The deer is captured by his ear, the fish by his tongue, the elephant by genital. So senses bring one's destruction. There was once a prostitute named Pingala, who lived in the city of Videha. And from her, the Avaduta learned a lesson. One day, Pingala dressed herself nicely and waited impatiently from evening to midnight for the arrival of her paramour, but he didn't come. Pingala became so disappointed that she developed detachment. Being inspired by her conscience, she abandoned her sinful desire, born of the thirst for meeting her paramour. She then meditated on Sri Hari and attained great peace in her mind. The instruction received from her is that desire for material enjoyment is the cause of our distress. Therefore, only one who has given up such desire can fix himself in meditation upon the Supreme Lord and thus achieve transcendental peace. Okay, so that's the introduction to the chapter. And it's already 10 after. So I'm going to read not the full message from verse 1. We'll continue, I guess, tomorrow. Verse 1 and then 2. So verse 1 is the translation. Sri Brahmana Uvacha. The saintly Brahmana said, O king, the embodied living entity automatically experiences unhappiness in hell or in heaven. Similarly, happiness will also be experienced even without one seeking it. Therefore, an intelligent person, a person of intelligent discrimination, does not make any endeavor to obtain such material happiness. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, which is a little different than this one. O king, just as material miseries come upon the living entities, whether in heaven or in hell, without endeavor, material happiness will automatically come without seeking it. For this reason, intelligent persons never endeavor for material enjoyment. Here's the BBT purport. BBT purport means this section of the Bhagavatam was not translated by Prabhupada or commented upon by him. It was commented upon and translated by his followers. The team, the inside story is, because Sri Dayananda Maharaj was Sannyasi Guru in GBC, it went under his name. But much of the work, the whole, the remaining portion of the Bhagavatam was Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu. Now there's sections in this part that's clear. It's got Sri Dayananda Maharaj's fingerprints all over it. His way of speaking is clear. But just for your information, according to Jabeda, who is the editor of all of this, Gopi did much of the work. Then he presented it to Sri Dayananda Maharaj, who looked at it and did what he did, and then it went to the press. Gopi did much of the work by reading through the commentaries and expressing in his own words. So this exercise, when we do reading, and we're called upon to, like open book test. Somebody was telling me they had a Bhakti Sastri open book test, but they had to write things in their own words. They weren't good at it. But it's important to learn how to say things in your own words, not just plagiarize, cut and paste. It helps you process what the message is and say it in your own words. Okay, so here's the BBT purport. One should not uselessly waste his life pursuing material sense gratification, because a specific quantity of material happiness will automatically come to one as a result of one's past and present fruitive activities. This lesson is learned from the Ajagara, or python, who lies down and accepts for his maintenance whatever comes of its own accord. Remarkably, in both material heaven and hell, happiness and unhappiness come automatically due to our previous activities. Although the portions of happiness and unhappiness certainly vary. Either in heaven or in hell, one may eat, drink, sleep, and have sex life. But these activities, being based on the material body, are temporary and inconsequential. An intelligent person should see that even the best material situation is actually a punishment for previous unlawful activities executed outside the scope of loving devotional service to God. A conditioned soul undergoes great trouble to obtain a little happiness after struggling in material life, which is full of hardship and hypocrisy. One may receive a little sense gratification, but this illusory pleasure in no way offsets the burden of suffering one must bear to obtain it. Material enjoyment has a price. Although it's limited and temporary, still there's a price. Endeavor and endeavor and endeavor. And it may or may not come anyway. And that is, sensation that's gone. Not a good plan. After all, a pretty hat. This is redundant, Marsh. He has this knack of presenting very funny examples. Anyway, a pretty hat is no cure for a homely face. If one really wants to experience happiness, if one wants to solve life's problems, one should live simply and reserve the major portion of one's life for loving service to Krishna. Even those who do not serve God receive a certain standard of maintenance from him. Therefore, we can just imagine the security the Lord affords to those who dedicate their lives to his devotional service. Paragraph. Unrefined fruitive workers foolishly worry only about the present life, whereas more pious karmis imprudently make elaborate arrangements for future material sense gratification, unaware that all such enjoyment is temporary. The real solution, however, is to understand that by pleasing the personality of Godhead, who is the master of all senses and all desires, one can attain permanent happiness. Such knowledge easily solves the problems of life. Isn't it? And that sounds encouraging. Easily solve all the problems of life. Sounds too easy. What about this? What about that? Let's go to Shruti Mangala made these presentations to illustrate the verse. So this is just chapter 1. That's a donkey and a carrot, by the way. I don't know how she comes up with this art, but it's great. A conditioned soul undergoes great trouble to obtain a little happiness after struggling in material life, which is full of hardship and hypocrisy. One may achieve a little sense gratification, but this illusory pleasure in no way offsets the burden of suffering one must bear to obtain it. Really good. And if one really wants to solve life's problems, one should live simply and reserve the major portion of one's life for loving service to Krishna. Even those who do not serve God receive a certain standard of maintenance from him. Therefore, we can just imagine the security the Lord affords to those who dedicate their lives to his devotional service. So the people on the left side, they look pretty happy. The people on the right side, they look like they're laboring hard. But in any case, Krishna is the source of everything, and we're dependent upon him. So it's simply a difference of consciousness. This idea of detachment is to open the door for attachment to Krishna. Say it negatively. As long as one is attached to the temporary, one is not going to become attached to service to God. Selfishness and love don't go together. So how to become unselfish? Well, knowledge is a start. It's not the complete, but knowledge and detachment from the selfish opens the door for love. That's the purpose of it, not the purpose of becoming God or becoming one with Brahman or something, or just diminishing misery. The purpose is attaining shelter of the personality of Godhead. All all of the valuable wisdom within the Vedas and its different processes and so forth have that same goal. They all have the same goal, taking shelter of the personality of God. It may look like they stand alone and this is valuable unto itself, and they all have one purpose. If anything that's ultimately beneficial has Vedic has that one purpose of becoming attached to the personality of Godhead in loving service. So let's see if there's some discussion. It's already 22 minutes after 8. A lot of introduction to the chapter, but I think it will help you get a picture of what we're doing as we're spending time together. We serve Krishna. That's the endeavor. We don't hang out, wait for Krishna to take care of us. We're not like a baby is totally dependent. They can't make any arrangement for themselves. But as the living entity matures in body and in consciousness, then we have some duties, and we do our duties because they're duties. Knowing that I'm not the cause of the result, I'm just doing a duty for Krishna. That's in the Krishna conscious sense. It's not my work as producing the results. Krishna is providing results. I'm doing some duty for Krishna. So we make some endeavor, but not specifically to get some results, but specifically to please Krishna. So that's the distinction. That's the bhakti life. We're not there yet. We're somewhere in between, materialists and spiritualists. Okay. She's got her hand up again.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. This detachment is not possible without the knowledge. That's what you're saying.
That's Prabhupada said, yes.
So, hearing this knowledge since a long time, it is there. But when things happen, of course, it's not. I remember this knowledge, but there is not really enough strength to not to be disturbed or yeah.
Yeah. So it's that's the liminal space. Then you keep going because some light is there, but it's not full light. Some detachment is there, but not full detachment. Some attachment on the material side, some attachment is still there. And so the intelligence is not fully operative. In a question and answer session, one man was harassing Prabhupada by saying, why doesn't an intelligent person do foolish things? Why does a learned person do foolish things? Prabhupada said, if he does foolish things, it means he's not learned. And then he kept giving examples of foolish, learned people doing foolish things, and Prabhupada didn't budge. It means he's not learned. So, you're not learned. Because there's still, but it's not a 0. It's just not a 10. Learned means na sochati na kanksati. So we're on the path in that liminal space, cultivating, and we're not there yet. So you know, but then, something overwhelms what you know. Attachment and something. The spirit of being an enjoyer, the spirit of being in control, or the spirit of something. It's not fully operative. It's not that you're a failure, just keep going. So that yearning, and when will that day be mine? And then investing with enthusiasm in the process further than what you've done thus far. And it's an ongoing, continuous enthusiasm. Whatever I've done thus far, let me go further. That's progress. Krishna will see the effort, Krishna will help. Because without Krishna's help, you won't get there. Anything else in the room? Otherwise, we're going to go online. Okay. Is there anything online? Nothing online. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki.
Yeah.